the brain has evolved to process sensory inputs from vision, from hearing, from touch, smell, taste. I mean, it's hardwired to absorb those inputs. And if you look at the brain, I mean, it doesn't have other inputs. Like, it doesn't have like a serial port and like a parallel port in it. So just randomly plugging into a certain area and trying to like feed calculator data may not be appropriate. There may not be an area there may be certain concepts that we're not wired up to understand in those ways. Or it may be that plugging into certain brain areas and just stuffing information may be inappropriate for its architecture. I think we'll only know when we start plumbing those depths.
So just like to not play devil's advocate, but just using, again, like a simplistic framework. So when you're speaking about anything, I'm hearing it, and then my brain's kind of sorting it out, and it's taking that information and knows, I guess, what part of the brain to process it, that should process it and interpret it. Is there an analogy to, if we're just, again, using the calculator example, where the brain can just figure out what to do with it?
I think one thing that might be, sometimes it's hard to kind of like, we have to introspect a little bit to think about like, and think by analogy about like, what would it be like to have, some sort of data stream plugged into our brain that's delivering data that we're not used to ingesting in that way, and thinking about how would the brain fundamentally do things that it's not really optimized to do. But one thing that could be interesting to think about would be the field of mnemonics. So for people who engage in these memory championships where they memorize like 1,000 digits of pi, they're not directly memorizing the digits. Their one famous strategy is to construct like a mind palace, and then to have a sort of a code where you convert like letters or characters or digits into objects, and then to like place the objects in rooms of your mind palace. Because people, their episodic memory, their spatial memory is a lot better than their ability to memorize arbitrary characters. And so it's possible, without being like a genius or without having like some sort of weird brain condition, to memorize long strings of arbitrary characters by memorizing a large space, let's say like a museum or like a hotel or something with a lot of different rooms, and then imagining particular like scenes or collections of objects that are very memorable in each room, and then imagine walking like through that scene and opening the door and seeing the things that you remember. It sort of deliberately forces a domain where we're not very strong, memorizing arbitrary characters, into a domain that we are very strong, like memorizing stories, events, scenes, places.
That makes sense.
And so, I mean, that's an example, a concrete example of taking the thing that we're not very good at, like raw numbers, and then stuffing them into a compartment of our brain that's been optimized for something else. And so I could imagine there could be interesting ways that BCIs have to interact with the brain that do exactly that. They figure out, how do I use an architecture that's optimized for, seeing things, meeting people, remembering faces, and then hack it, so to speak, to do interesting things. Or I have done the calculation off board and now I need to stuff it back in the brain. Like, how do I do that efficiently?